Dust swirled through Redemption Creek as 12-year-old Eli Thatcher counted his last few coins. Orphaned last winter, he'd survived on odd jobs and scraps. The auction was his final hope. He needed a horse to find work at distant ranches. Townsfolk snickered as he approached the ancient palomino nobody wanted. The horse's ribs showed through dull coat, head hanging low. "Boy's buying himself a walking grave," someone muttered. But something in those tired eyes called to Eli. When he placed his final coin in the auctioneer's palm, laughter erupted. What could one broken boy and one broken horse possibly accomplish together? Could this unlikely pair possibly survive the dangerous journey that lay ahead? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eli clutched the worn leather pouch, fingers tracing the familiar stitching his father had mended countless times. Inside, 3 copper coins and a single silver piece, his entire fortune. He tucked it back into his frayed shirt as he guided Dust through the morning mist, away from Redemption Creek. The faded locket around his neck bumped gently against his chest with each of Dust's labored steps. Inside, the tiny painted portraits of his parents remained vivid despite the tarnished casing. His mother's kind eyes and father's proud smile, frozen in a happier time before last winter's fever took them both. "Just you and me now," Eli whispered, patting Dust's bony neck. The palomino's ears twitched in response, his breathing heavy even at their slow pace. 6 months since the funeral. 6 months of sleeping in the corner of Abe Miller's livery stable in exchange for mucking stalls and running errands. 6 months of saving every penny, stretching every meal, enduring the pitying glances and occasional cruelty of townspeople who saw him as nothing but another burden. "We'll prove them wrong," Eli said. More to himself than the horse, memories of his father flooded back, strong hands guiding his small ones as they groomed their family's plow horse. "Treat 'em with respect, son," James Thatcher would say. "A horse knows when you see him as a partner or just a tool." His father had been a gifted horseman before settling into farming, could gentle the most stubborn mustang with patience and quiet words. Eli's reverie broke at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. He tensed, recognizing the riders even before they appeared around the bend. Theo Blackwood and 2 of his father's ranch hands. Silas Blackwood owned half the county and wanted the rest. His sprawling ranch house stood on the hill overlooking town. His cattle grazed on land that once belonged to smaller homesteaders. Men who refused to sell found their fences cut, their wells mysteriously dry. Eli's parents had been among the few who held out. "Well, look what we found," Theo called, his chestnut mare prancing sideways as they approached. At 15, Theo already had his father's cruel smile and expensive taste. Orphan boy and his dying nag. The ranch hands chuckled on cue. Eli kept his eyes forward, nudging Dust to continue their slow pace. "I'm talking to you, Thatcher." Theo spurred his horse forward, cutting in front of them. Dust stopped, head low but ears alert. "Just passing through," Eli said quietly. "Don't want any trouble. Where you think you're going? That bag of bones won't make it 5 miles. "Montana," Eli answered before he could stop himself. "My uncle has a ranch there." This brought fresh laughter. "Montana? That's 300 miles, boy. You'll both be buzzard food before the week's out." Eli's hands tightened on the reins. His uncle Jacob, his mother's brother, had visited twice when Eli was younger. He'd offered to take Eli in after the funeral, but Eli had no way to reach him, no money for stagecoach fare. The letter he'd sent might never have arrived. "Surprised that broken-down creature cost even what little you had," said one of the hands. "Saw you at the auction. Blackwood horses start at $50. Theo circled them, eyeing Dust with contempt. "My father says your parents were fools too. Stubborn to the end." His voice dropped to a mock whisper. "Maybe that fever had some help spreading to your farm." Rage flared in Eli's chest. Before he could respond, Dust suddenly raised his head and let out a shrill whinny that startled all 4 horses. Theo's mare reared, nearly unseating him. "Control your animal." Theo shouted, red-faced as he fought to settle his mount. Dust stood calmly now, as if nothing had happened. For a moment, Eli could have sworn he saw something like satisfaction in the old horse's eyes. "You'll regret that," Theo snarled once he had his mare under control. "Just like your parents regretted crossing my father." They galloped away, leaving Eli and Dust in a cloud of dust. Eli's heart pounded. Had Dust somehow known? Impossible. Yet the timing— "Thank you," he whispered, leaning forward to stroke the horse's neck. Dust nickered softly. Martha's general store appeared ahead, a final outpost before the long trail north. The kind widow had slipped him extra food more than once when times were hardest. "Just need a few supplies," Eli told Dust, dismounting stiffly. "Then we're leaving this place behind." Inside, Martha greeted him with a sad smile. "Heard about your purchase yesterday." Her eyes drifted to the window where Dust stood. "Taking him with you to your uncle's?" Eli nodded, placing his precious coins on the counter. "Some jerky and matches, please." "Whatever these will buy," Martha added extra to his small pile. "On the house," she lowered her voice. "That horse you bought, Jenkins the farrier says there's something odd about him." "Odd?" "Says he's got quality breeding despite appearances. Notice anything strange?" Eli thought about Dust's reaction to Theo. "Maybe. I don't know. Jenkins mentioned the way he moves is a choice, not a weakness." Martha wrapped his supplies in paper. "Just thought you should know." Outside again, Eli studied Dust with fresh eyes. The horse gazed back, patient and somehow knowing. "Are you choosing to be slow?" he whispered. "Why?" Dust simply blinked. But Eli couldn't shake the feeling that behind those eyes lay intelligence far beyond what he'd imagined. Dawn broke with golden fingers stretching across the livery stable's weathered planks. Eli had returned for one final night, sleeping beside Dust in the straw. He divided his meager breakfast, stale bread and a wrinkled apple, giving the larger portion to the horse. "Found this yesterday," Eli said, pulling a rusted horseshoe from his pocket. His father once told him horseshoes brought luck when hung above doorways. Without a door to call his own, Eli had kept it close instead. "Thought we might need some luck." Dust munched contentedly, nuzzling Eli's shoulder when finished. The boy carefully brushed the Palomino's coat, revealing dappled patterns beneath the dust and grime. Strange markings like half-moons dotted the horse's flank, and a peculiar scar ran along his left shoulder. "That's no ordinary plough horse." Eli startled at the voice. Marshal Wilson stood in the doorway, thumbs hooked in his belt. The lawman had been decent to Eli after his parents died, letting him sleep in the jail on the coldest nights. "Just old," Eli said cautiously. Wilson approached, studying Dust with a practiced eye. "Might not last a week, son. Hate to see you stranded miles from nowhere when he gives out. He's stronger than he looks. Hope you're right." Wilson's gaze softened. "Montana's a long way. Why not take the stage at least partway?" "Can't afford it." Eli continued brushing, revealing more of the unusual markings. "Well, good luck then." Wilson tipped his hat. "Stop by Jenkins before you go. He's got something for you." The farrier's shop rang with the familiar clang of hammer on anvil. Jenkins, grey-bearded and soot-covered, paused his work when they approached. "So this is your purchase." He set down his tools, running calloused hands along Dust's legs and examining his hooves. "Interesting. Marshall said you wanted to see me." Jenkins seemed lost in thought. "Oh, yes. That old nag needs shoes before a long journey." He worked quickly, pausing occasionally to mutter to himself. When finished, he stepped back, arms folded. "There's quality breeding here, boy." "Thoroughbred lines, unless I miss my guess," Eli frowned. "At the auction, nobody wanted him. Folks see what they expect to see." Jenkins tapped Dust's hind leg, and the horse obediently lifted his hoof. "Notice how he responds to proper signals? Been trained by professionals. Then why's he so slow?" Jenkins chuckled. "That's the curious part. His gait is a choice, not a limit. Watch his eyes when you're riding. He's holding back." Eli remembered Dust's reaction to Theo. But why would he? Some horses have reasons. Jenkins returned to his forge. "Oh, almost forgot." He disappeared into the back room, returning with an old saddle and bridle. These were left for repair years ago. Owner never returned. Better than that rope you're using. I can't pay. Didn't ask for payment. Jenkins adjusted the saddle on Dust's back. Had a horse like this once. Special. Knew things other horses didn't. Later, outside Martha's store, Eli practiced mounting with the proper saddle. Dust stood patiently, but his ears twitched at every command. Martha emerged with a small saddlebag. Some provisions," she said, attaching it securely. "Hardtack and jerky last longest." "Thank you, ma'am." She lowered her voice. "Blackwood's men were asking about you this morning. Mentioned your horse specifically." Eli's stomach tightened. "Why? Wouldn't say. But they seemed mighty interested for men who'd normally not notice an orphan boy." Her eyes darted to Dust. "I'd leave soon if I were you." Back in the stable, Eli spread his father's old map across the straw. The route to Montana stretched impossibly far, crossing territories marked with warnings, Indian lands, bandit country, rough passage. His father's voice seemed to whisper from memory, "Navigate by waterways when you can, son. Follow the North Star when trails fail." Dust peered over his shoulder at the map, breath warm against Eli's neck. "We need to leave at first light," Eli said, running his finger along the route. "Think we can make it?" The horse nickered softly, nudging the map with his nose. That night Eli slept fitfully beside Dust, using the saddle as a pillow. He whispered his fears and hopes to the horse, not caring if anyone thought him foolish for treating an animal as a confidant. "I'm scared," he admitted in the darkness. "But I'm more scared of staying." Dust shifted closer, his body warm against Eli's back. Before dawn, Eli gathered their few belongings. He mounted awkwardly, still unaccustomed to the proper saddle. Jenkins' words echoed in his mind as he observed Dust's alert eyes contradicting his seemingly weary posture. They left Redemption Creek as the first light broke over the eastern hills. Eli couldn't help looking back at the only home he'd known, the church steeple, the general store, the blacksmith's billowing smoke. Dust plodded steadily northward, each step carrying them farther from the past and toward an uncertain future. The rusted horseshoe hung from Eli's saddlebag, swinging gently with each deliberate stride. 3 days on the trail had taught Eli much about his new companion. Dust rose before dawn without prompting, waited patiently during rest stops, and seemed to know which grasses were safest to eat. What the horse hadn't done was move any faster than his plodding pace, despite Eli's occasional urging. Eli unfolded the torn map, his most precious possession after his mother's locket. His father had drawn it years ago when discussing a potential cattle drive to Montana. The worn paper showed rivers, mountains, and settlements, with handwritten notes about water sources and dangerous territories. "We should reach Miller's Creek by nightfall," Eli told Dust, tracing their route. "If we keep this pace," the horse's ears perked forward as if understanding. Eli had grown increasingly convinced that Dust comprehended far more than an ordinary animal should. A memory surfaced, his father explaining navigation under starlight. "The North Star never wavers, son. When all else fails, it guides you home." James Thatcher had been preparing his boy for a world that could turn harsh without warning. How quickly those lessons had become necessary. Eli secured the map in his saddlebag beside the meager remains of Martha's provisions. Water wouldn't be a problem today. The creek ran parallel to their path, but food was another matter. He'd need to set snares tonight. The sound of approaching riders froze him mid-motion. Quickly, he guided Dust behind a cluster of boulders, heart hammering. 3 horses passed on the main trail, their riders laughing and passing a bottle between them. One voice Eli recognized immediately, Theo Blackwood. "Waste of time," one man was saying. "Boy's probably dead already." "Father wants that horse," Theo replied. "It says it matches the description." "Of what? That broken-down nag?" "You'd be surprised," Theo said. "Appearances deceive." Their voices faded as they continued north. Eli waited several minutes before emerging, cold dread settling in his stomach. They were being hunted, but why? Jenkins' words about Dust's breeding echoed in his thoughts. "They're ahead of us now," Eli whispered to Dust. "We'll need another route." The horse nudged Eli's map pocket. Startled, Eli withdrew the map again. Dust's nose pointed to a thin line marking a lesser trail that branched eastward before rejoining their path miles ahead. "That's longer," Eli frowned, then looked at Dust's intelligent eyes. "But safer?" Decision made. They turned east onto a barely visible trail. The terrain grew rougher, forcing them to navigate rocky slopes that would have challenged even experienced riders. Yet Dust moved with surprising confidence, choosing secure footing with each step. By midday, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Eli studied them with growing concern. His father had taught him to read weather signs. "These clouds promise trouble. We need shelter," he murmured, almost in response. Dust veered slightly, following what appeared to be game trails rather than their planned route. Eli hesitated only briefly before trusting the horse's instinct. An hour later, they crested a small ridge to find an unexpected sight, a small cabin nestled against the hillside. Smoke curled from its chimney. Approaching cautiously, Eli called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" No answer came. The cabin door stood slightly ajar. Dismounting, Eli approached slowly, while Dust remained alert, ears forward. Inside, embers glowed in a stone fireplace, but the single room stood empty. Recent footprints in the dust suggested the occupant had left in haste. A half-eaten meal sat on the rough-hewn table. "Strange," Eli muttered, stepping back outside. Nothing seemed disturbed or violent, just hastily abandoned. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Making a quick decision, Eli led Dust to a lean-to shelter beside the cabin. "We'll wait out the storm here. The owner might return." As he unsaddled Dust, the horse grew increasingly agitated, pawing at the ground and tossing his head toward the cabin. "What is it?" Eli asked, but Dust continued his nervous movements. Reluctantly, Eli returned to the cabin and searched more thoroughly. Under a loose floorboard near the bed, his fingers found something unexpected. A small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Unwrapping it revealed a stack of papers. Most seemed like standard land deeds, but one caught his eye. A hand-drawn map remarkably similar to his father's, showing the same route to Montana with the same landmarks. In the corner, a familiar name, property of Jacob Thatcher. Eli's breath caught. Uncle Jacob. This had been his shelter, perhaps recently. Outside, the first heavy raindrops fell. Dust nickered urgently from the lean-to. "You knew," Eli whispered as he returned, showing the map to the horse. "Somehow, you knew this was connected to my uncle." Dust's intelligent eyes reflected the growing storm as thunder cracked overhead. Eden stored his uncle's map with his father's, the twin documents now their guide northward. As rain lashed against the shelter, Eli whispered to Dust, "We're on the right path. I don't know how, but you're leading us to him." The horse nudged Eli's chest, right where his mother's locket rested, as if confirming something only he understood. The storm raged through the night, transforming gentle streams into raging torrents by morning. Eli stood at the cabin door, surveying the changed landscape. Their planned route now lay beneath rushing water. He fingered his father's compass, slightly damaged from when he'd fallen during chores last year, but still functional. The glass was cracked, but the needle swung true when he held it level. "We'll need to find higher ground," he told Dust, who watched him with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. They departed as soon as the rain subsided, leaving the cabin exactly as they'd found it. If Uncle Jacob returned, Eli wanted him to know someone had passed through safely. The washed-out trail forced them to improvise. Eli consulted both maps frequently, comparing his father's notes with his uncle's markings. They often indicated the same landmarks, but sometimes offered different warnings or suggestions. By midday, they encountered other travelers, a family in a wagon heading south. "Road ahead's washed out completely," the father warned, eyeing Dust with amusement. "That old nag won't make it through the mud that's coming. You'd be better turning back, boy." His wife nodded sympathetically. Flash floods took out Miller's Bridge. No crossing for miles. Their children stared at Eli from the wagon bed, whispering and giggling about his broken-down horse. "Thank you for the warning," Eli replied politely, ignoring their mockery. His parents had taught him courtesy, regardless of how others behaved. As the wagon continued south, the father called back, "Blackwood's men were asking about a boy and a yellow horse, offering good money for information. You in trouble, son?" Eli's blood ran cold. "Just heading to my uncle's place." The man studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "Didn't see nobody matching that description," he said meaningfully. "Good luck." When they were alone again, Eli patted Dust's neck. "We need to be more careful." Word spreading. They altered course eastward, seeking higher ground. The storm had transformed the landscape, making navigation increasingly difficult. Twice they had to backtrack when paths ended in swollen creeks too dangerous to ford. Late afternoon brought darker clouds and distant thunder. The temperature dropped sharply, and Eli's thin jacket provided little protection against the biting wind. "We need shelter," he muttered, scanning the horizon. A jagged lightning bolt split the sky, illuminating a structure in the distance. Another cabin, this one perched precariously on a rocky outcropping. "There!" Eli pointed, relief flooding through him. They reached the miner's cabin just as the deluge began anew. Unlike Uncle Jacob's well-maintained shelter, this one had been abandoned years ago. The roof sagged dangerously and the door hung from a single hinge. Not ideal, Eli sighed, leading Dust inside. At least it was dry near the back wall. Thunder crashed directly overhead as they settled in. Eli unpacked their dwindling supplies, offering Dust the last apple. The horse refused, nudging it back toward Eli. "You need to eat too," Eli insisted. Dust remained stubborn until Eli relented and took a bite, then offered the rest to the horse. The cabin groaned under the storm's assault. Wind howled through broken windows, and water began seeping through the damaged ceiling. Eli moved their belongings to the driest corner and spread his blanket for them to share. A tremendous crack shook the structure. Eli looked up just as a section of roof collapsed, sending water and debris cascading down. Before he could react, powerful teeth gripped his collar, yanking him backward as a beam crashed where he'd been standing. Dust had pulled him to safety. The horse stood between Eli and the damaged section, body tense and protective. Outside, lightning illuminated the landscape in ghostly flashes. "You saved me," Eli whispered, shaking from more than cold. With half the cabin now exposed to the elements, they huddled together in the remaining sheltered corner. Eli wrapped his arms around Dust's neck, the horse's body heat, their only comfort, as rain lashed sideways through the broken roof. For the first time, Eli truly understood. This was no ordinary horse. The intelligence in those eyes, the deliberate actions, the protective instinct. Dust had pulled him from danger with the precision and decision of a thinking being. "Who are you?" he whispered against the horse's damp coat. Through the night, the storm's fury intensified. The cabin creaked and groaned around them. Eli dozed fitfully, startling awake at each crash of thunder. Throughout it all, Dust remained vigilant, standing guard over the boy. Dawn revealed a transformed world, trees uprooted, paths washed away, the landscape rendered unrecognizable. Their planned route had vanished beneath mud and debris. As Eli surveyed the destruction from the cabin's broken doorway, compass in hand, the magnitude of their challenge became clear. This journey would test them far more severely than he had imagined. Beside him, Dust stood tall, stronger somehow than he had appeared in Redemption Creek. In the morning light, his coat gleamed with unexpected luster beneath the dirt and neglect. "We'll find another way," Eli promised. More to himself than the horse, Dust nickered softly, nudging Eli's compass hand, aligning it precisely with north. The storm had altered more than the landscape. Something had shifted between Eli and Dust, a deeper trust, an unspoken understanding. As they navigated the muddy aftermath, Eli found himself consulting the horse on decisions, watching those intelligent eyes for reactions. Their supplies dwindled dangerously. The last of Martha's provisions vanished by midday, and Eli's attempts at snaring rabbits proved unsuccessful. His stomach growled persistently as they followed a game trail through unfamiliar territory. "We need to find food and better shelter," he told Dust, studying both maps. Neither showed landmarks he could recognize in the transformed terrain. Late afternoon brought the welcome sight of an abandoned homestead nestled in a small valley. Unlike the miner's cabin, this had been a proper farm once. A weathered two-story house, collapsing barn, and overgrown fields stretching toward distant hills. "Hello," Eli called as they approached. No answer came beyond the whisper of wind through broken windows. The house had been abandoned for years, dust thick on every surface. Eli found a root cellar with a few preserved jars still intact, dusty but edible. His first proper meal in days. While exploring the barn, something caught his eye. Half buried in debris lay an unusual metal object. Eli excavated it carefully. A branding iron with an intricate design, a lightning bolt crossed with what appeared to be a horseshoe. "Strange design for these parts," he murmured, turning it over. When he brought it back to where Dust waited, the horse's reaction was immediate and alarming. Dust reared slightly, backing away from the iron with obvious distress, eyes wide with what could only be described as recognition. "You know this mark," Eli whispered, lowering the branding iron, moving cautiously. He approached Dust, speaking in soothing tones. "Let me see, boy." "It's all right." After several minutes of gentle coaxing, Dust allowed Eli to examine his left flank. Brushing aside the dirty coat revealed what he'd suspected, a faint scar in the exact pattern of the branding iron. "This was your home," Eli realized aloud. "Or at least you were branded here." Dust's nervous energy remained, eyes darting toward the house as if expecting danger. Eli returned to exploring with new purpose, searching for clues about the horse's past. In what had once been a study, moldy newspapers and ledgers lay scattered across a desk. Most were illegible from water damage, but one protected stack yielded a startling discovery. Clippings about horse racing, specifically about a champion named Thunderbolt. The descriptions matched Dust in peculiar ways. Distinctive half-moon markings along the left flank, an unusual golden coat with dappled shoulders. Most telling was a blurry photograph showing a magnificent racing horse with the same lightning bolt brand. The final article reported the mysterious disappearance of Thunderbolt before a major race, with a substantial reward offered for information. "Thunderbolt," Eli whispered, glancing toward Dust, who watched from the doorway, ears forward and alert. "Is that your real name?" Before he could investigate further, the distant sound of hoofbeats froze him in place. Through a grimy window, he spotted riders approaching, at least 4 men, led by a figure Eli recognized with dread. "Reynolds, Blackwood's foreman. Quick," he whispered urgently to Dust. "Hide in the barn." Instead of complying, the horse nudged Eli toward a narrow staircase. Understanding flashed between them. Dust wanted them to hide together upstairs. They barely made it to the second floor when the riders entered the yard below. Through cracks in the floorboards, Eli watched and listened, heart pounding. "Spread out," Reynolds ordered. "Check the barn and outbuildings." "They've been here recently. How can you be sure?" asked one man. Reynolds dismounted, examining the ground. "Horse prints. And I recognize that dumb animal's gait. Drags his right hind leg slightly. Boss is offering $1,000 for that horse," another man commented. "Never understood why. Looked half dead at the auction." Reynolds snorted. "That's no ordinary horse. That's Thunderbolt, the racing champion that disappeared last year. That broken-down nag?" Disbelief colored the man's voice. "Appearances deceive," Reynolds replied. "Horse is smart. Been hiding his abilities. Worth 20 times what Blackwood's offering. But the breeding potential is priceless." Eli's eyes widened, meeting Dust's, no, Thunderbolt's, knowing gaze. The pieces clicked into place. The unusual training, the deliberate slowness, the intelligence beyond normal horses. "The boy's just a complication," Reynolds continued below. "Blackwood wants the horse unharmed. The boy doesn't matter." Cold fear washed through Eli. These men would kill him without hesitation for Thunderbolt. The horse pressed closer, breath warm against Eli's cheek. Her silent promise of protection, partnership. "Don't see 'em, boss," called a voice from the barn. "But someone's been digging around in there." They can't be far, Reynolds replied. We'll camp here tonight. They'll have to use the road north eventually. As the men settled in below, Eli and Thunderbolt remained motionless in their hiding place. The simple journey to Montana had become something far more dangerous, a desperate flight with Eli's life hanging in the balance. Night fell, bringing darkness but no safety. Somewhere below, killers waited for dawn to resume their hunt. Dawn crept through the cracks of their hiding place, illuminating dust motes dancing in thin beams of light. Eli had barely slept, listening to Blackwood's men below. Thunderbolt, for Eli now thought of him by his true name, had remained vigilant through the night, ears constantly adjusting to track movements downstairs. They're saddling up, Eli whispered, peering through a gap in the floorboards. Reynolds was issuing orders, sending 2 men north along the main road, while he and another would sweep east along the creek. We'll go west, Eli decided. Wait until they're gone, then slip out the back. 30 agonizing minutes passed before they dared move. Descending the stairs cautiously, Eli gathered what little food remained in the root cellar, then searched the house one last time for anything useful. In the kitchen drawer, partially stuck behind a loose board, he found a folded paper, a wanted poster yellowed with age. The image showed only a silhouette of a horse, but the text was clear. Reward, $5,000 for information leading to recovery of thoroughbred stallion Thunderbolt, property of Blackwater Racing Stables. Distinctive lightning bolt brand on left flank. The sum was staggering, more money than Eli had ever imagined. No wonder Blackwood wanted the horse. With trembling hands, he folded the poster and tucked it into his shirt beside his mother's locket. They slipped from the house through a back window, Eli leading Thunderbolt in a wide arc, away from the directions the men had taken. For once, he was grateful for the horse's deliberate slowness. It left less obvious tracks than a galloping mount would. Why do you hide what you can do? Eli asked quietly as they picked their way through dense underbrush. You could outrun them, couldn't you? Thunderbolt's intelligent eyes met his, but the horse gave no indication of changing his plodding pace. By midday, they reached a small town nestled in a valley. Eli hesitated at its outskirts, weighing the risk of being seen against their need for supplies. Stay here, he told Thunderbolt, concealing the horse in a grove of trees. I'll be quick. The general store smelled of coffee and leather. Eli kept his head down, ears open as he selected the cheapest essentials: jerky, matches, a second-hand blanket. 2 men conversed by the potbelly stove, unaware of his presence. Fastest horse I ever saw, one was saying. Won 5 races in a row before it vanished. Blackwood's offering good money to find it, replied the other. Says it's disguised somehow. Moving slow, acting broken down. Smart animal, the first man chuckled. Word is the jockey helped it escape after Blackwater Racing nearly ran it to death. Eli's hands stilled on the shelf. Thunderbolt's previous owners had mistreated him. No wonder the horse concealed his abilities. The storekeeper eyed Eli suspiciously when he approached the counter with his meager purchases. You that orphan boy they're looking for? Eli's heart hammered. Sir! The man slid a paper across the counter. Another wanted poster, this one showing a crude sketch of a boy and horse. Sheriff put this up this morning. Says you stole a valuable horse? I paid for him fair, Eli protested, voice barely above a whisper. At auction in Redemption Creek. The storekeeper studied him, then glanced toward the door. I ain't one to judge. Blackwood's no friend to small folk. He leaned closer. Out the back door. Sheriff checks in here regular. Gratitude flooded through Eli. Thank you, sir. Best hurry. And boy, the man's eyes were serious. If that horse is what they claim, there ain't a safe town for hundreds of miles. Blackwood has connections everywhere. Eli slipped out the back, circling wide to where Thunderbolt waited. The horse nickered softly at his approach, clearly relieved. They're looking everywhere for us, Eli explained, securing his purchases. But I learned something about you. He stroked Thunderbolt's neck. Your jockey helped you escape, didn't he? Because they were hurting you. The horse's eyes seemed to hold years of memory and pain. I won't let them take you back, Eli promised. And I won't make you run unless you want to. For the first time, he wondered if the horse had chosen him specifically at the auction. Not just a desperate purchase, but a deliberate choice by an intelligent creature seeking a trustworthy companion. They avoided the main road, using both maps to find lesser-known trails. Late afternoon brought them to high ground overlooking the valley they'd just left. In the distance, riders moved along roads like ants, still searching. "We need to keep moving," Eli murmured. "They won't give up." Alone on the ridgeline with no one to witness, Eli decided to test a theory. He mounted Thunderbolt and leaned forward. "Show me," he whispered. "Just once. Show me what you can really do." For several heartbeats, nothing changed. Then, like a switch had flipped, Thunderbolt's posture transformed. His head raised, muscles tensed, and with a powerful surge, he leapt forward. The sudden acceleration nearly unseated Eli. For 10 glorious seconds, Thunderbolt flew across the ridgeline, moving with astonishing speed and grace before gradually slowing to his familiar, plodding pace. Breathless, Eli patted the horse's neck with newfound reverence. "That's why they want you so badly." Thunderbolt tossed his head once, as if acknowledging a secret finally shared. As they continued northward, Eli felt the weight of his promise. This magnificent creature had trusted him with his secret, had perhaps chosen him specifically. Now Eli had to prove worthy of that trust by somehow getting them both safely to Montana, with Blackwood's men closing in from all sides. A winding river carved through the landscape ahead, its waters swollen from recent storms. Eli studied both maps, seeking a safe crossing point. According to his father's notes, there should be a shallow ford 5 miles upstream. "We'll follow the river north," he told Thunderbolt. "Stay in the tree line to avoid being spotted." The afternoon sun beat down relentlessly as they picked their way along the riverbank. Eli's throat burned with thirst, his water canteen nearly empty. Finally, he guided Thunderbolt to the water's edge. "Careful," he cautioned, dismounting. While Eli filled his canteen, Thunderbolt waded confidently into the rushing water to drink. The horse seemed unbothered by the current that swirled around his legs. "You're good with water, aren't you?" Eli observed an idea formed. The river would hide our tracks. The ford proved deeper than expected due to the recent storms. Eli hesitated at the crossing, uncertain. "What do you think?" he asked Thunderbolt. The horse studied the rushing water, then nudged Eli toward his back. Understanding, Eli mounted and gripped the reins tightly. Without prompting, Thunderbolt entered the river. Rather than crossing directly, he moved diagonally with the current, choosing his footing with remarkable precision. The water rose to Eli's knees, then his waist, but Thunderbolt never faltered. When they reached the opposite bank, Eli's clothes were soaked. But they had crossed safely. "You've done that before," Eli said with newfound appreciation. They made camp in a sheltered hollow, far enough from the river to avoid overnight flooding. While gathering firewood, Eli noticed a small bulge in Thunderbolt's saddle he hadn't spotted before. Curious, he examined the worn leather more carefully. A hidden pocket had been sewn into the saddle's underside, nearly invisible unless one knew to look for it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, Eli found silver racing spurs and a piece of silk, a jockey's colors in blue and gold, with Thunderbolt embroidered in elegant script. "These belong to your jockey," Eli whispered, showing the items to the horse. "The one who helped you escape." Thunderbolt nudged the silk gently with his nose, a gesture almost like remembrance. That night, beside a small fire, Eli made his decision. "I won't return you for the reward," he told Thunderbolt. "Not even $5,000 would be worth sending you back to people who hurt you." He remembered his father's words years ago when teaching him to care for their plow horse. "An animal gives you its trust and its work. In return, you owe it kindness and respect. Break that bargain, and you break something in yourself too. Pa would have liked you," Eli said, stroking Thunderbolt's neck. He believed in treating horses as partners, not tools. The memory of his father brought both comfort and renewed grief. James Thatcher had been stern but fair, quick to correct but equally quick to praise. He'd taught Eli that a man's character showed in how he treated those weaker than himself. "I miss them," Eli admitted quietly. Every day, Thunderbolt settled beside him, offering warmth against the night chill. For the first time, Eli spoke aloud the fear he'd carried since his parents' deaths. What if Uncle Jacob doesn't want me? What if he's moved on, or... He couldn't finish the thought. The horse listened as only animals can, without judgment or interruption. In the firelight, Eli studied the racing silks again. The craftsmanship spoke of expensive care, a stark contrast to the cruel treatment Thunderbolt had apparently endured. People can be strange that way, he mused. Spend fortunes on something, then treat it poorly. Morning brought clearing skies and a new determination. As Eli checked Thunderbolt for any injuries from their river crossing, he practiced the racing commands he'd heard at county fairs. "Steady," he said in a low voice. "Mark, set." At set, Thunderbolt's ears pricked forward, muscles tensing slightly. "Definitely a trained response. You know the commands." Eli nodded. "But you choose when to listen." He mounted carefully, adjusting the saddle. "Today we practice, but only if you're willing. I need to know what you can do, in case we have to escape quickly." In a secluded meadow, far from any roads or settlements, they began. At first, Thunderbolt maintained his plodding pace, ignoring Eli's gentle cues. Then gradually the horse responded, a trot, then a canter, revealing the fluid grace of his true breeding. "That's it," Eli encouraged. "Just between us." For brief moments, Thunderbolt allowed his natural ability to show. Precise turns, perfect stops, the smooth acceleration of a born racer. Never full speed, but enough to demonstrate his extraordinary training. When they stopped to rest, Eli examined an old scar on Thunderbolt's flank. "They used spurs too harshly, didn't they?" The horse shied slightly at the touch, confirming Eli's suspicion. "I won't use them," Eli promised, packing the silver spurs away. "We'll find our own way to work together." As they continued northward, Eli felt a growing confidence in their partnership. If Blackwood's men caught up, Thunderbolt could outrun them, if he chose to. The decision would remain the horse's, a matter of trust rather than command. That night, studying both maps by starlight, Eli traced their progress. Montana remained distant, but with each passing day, the connection between boy and horse deepened. Two orphans, each carrying invisible scars, finding in each other the family they'd lost. A thin wisp of smoke rising above the tree line caught Eli's attention. After days avoiding all human contact, the sight of a potential campfire presented both opportunity and danger. They needed supplies, but every encounter risked discovery. "What do you think?" he asked Thunderbolt, who sniffed the air with ears forward, showing curiosity rather than alarm. They approached cautiously. In a small clearing, an elderly man sat beside a modest fire, his weathered face deeply lined beneath silver hair worn in long braids. A paint horse grazed nearby, unburdened by saddle or bridle. The old man looked up without surprise. "I wondered when you would arrive," he said in accented English. "The birds spoke of your coming." Eli hesitated at the edge of the clearing, one hand on Thunderbolt's neck. "We didn't mean to disturb you, sir." No disturbance. The man gestured to the fire. "Join me, I'm Makya." Something in the old man's calm demeanor eased Eli's wariness. He dismounted, keeping Thunderbolt close. "I'm Eli. This is..." He hesitated, then decided on truth. "Thunderbolt," Makya nodded. "A good name. Strong spirit." His dark eyes studied the horse with appreciation. "He has chosen you. You can tell. The way he stands beside you, not behind." Makya stirred a pot hanging over the fire. "Hungry?" The stew was simple, but the most delicious thing Eli had tasted in days. As they ate, Makya spoke of the land, pointing out which plants could be eaten, which had medicinal properties. "You travel north," he said. "It wasn't a question," Eli nodded. "To my uncle's ranch in Montana. Long journey. Difficult." Makya glanced at Thunderbolt, who had moved to stand beside the paint horse. The two animals seemed deep in silent communication. "And men follow you?" Eli nearly choked on his stew. "How did you—" "I listen," Makya touched his ear. "Many voices carry on wind. Men with guns search for a boy and special horse. His expression remained neutral. They offer money? The horse isn't theirs, Eli said defensively. They mistreated him. Yes, I see old wounds. Makia nodded toward Thunderbolt. Not all scars show on skin. As night fell, Makia shared his wisdom freely. He showed Eli better techniques for covering their tracks, which berries would give them energy for long days. How to read the behavior of animals, warning of danger ahead. Your horse, Makia said, as they watched the animals grazing together. He speaks with Shadow. He gestured to his paint horse. They understand each other. Is that possible? To those who listen, Makia's eyes crinkled. Horses speak their own language, better than men sometimes. From a pouch at his waist, Makia withdrew a small leather bundle secured with sinew. For you, he said, offering it to Eli. Medicine. Inside, Eli found various dried herbs, roots, and leaves, each wrapped separately with small markings. This for fever, Makia pointed to a bitter-smelling leaf. This for wounds, this for horse when legs tired. He tapped the last packet. Most important, if horse falls sick, this will heal. I can't take your medicine, Eli protested. Not mine to keep, only to pass on. Makia's expression grew serious. Journey ahead has many dangers. Men follow close behind. Eli's stomach tightened. How close? 2 days, maybe less. Makia pointed southeast. They follow river, thinking you crossed at ford. Relief flooded through Eli. Their river-crossing strategy had worked. But leader is clever, Makia continued. Soon we'll find true trail. Before dawn, Eli prepared to depart. Thunderbolt seemed reluctant to leave Shadow, the 2 horses standing head to tail, as they had throughout the night. They have said their goodbyes, Makia explained, handing Eli a small bundle of food. Shadow has told your horse of safe paths ahead. Eli accepted the food gratefully. Thank you for everything. I wish I had something to give you in return. You already have. Makia's weathered hand gestured to the horses. It is good to see the young caring for the voiceless with respect. As Eli mounted, Makia approached Thunderbolt, speaking softly in his native tongue while touching the horse's forehead. Thunderbolt lowered his head in an almost reverent response. What did you tell him? Eli asked. That his spirit is strong, and that yours walks beside his, not above. Makia stepped back. Now I tell you, listen when he speaks. Not with ears, but with heart. I will, Eli promised. One more thing. Makia's expression grew solemn. Men who chase you, their leader wears death around him like a blanket. If he catches you, he will not show mercy. Reynolds, Eli whispered. Makia nodded. Avoid open land for 2 days. Travel where trees are thick, near water when possible. Thank you, Eli said again. Throat tight with emotion at the unexpected kindness. As they departed, Makia called after them. Remember, boy, sometimes the fastest path is not the straightest. For hours after, Eli contemplated the old man's words. Thunderbolt moved with new purpose, occasionally stopping to sniff the air or listen intently before choosing their path. Are you following Shadow's advice? Eli asked, smiling despite the danger behind them. That night, sheltered beneath a rocky overhang, Eli carefully organized Makia's medicine pouch, committing each herb's purpose to memory. The encounter had given him more than supplies. It had renewed his hope, his sense that perhaps they weren't entirely alone in their journey. His hand rested on Thunderbolt's neck. We'll make it, he whispered. Together. 30 miles behind Eli and Thunderbolt, Reynolds crouched by the remains of a small campfire, fingers sifting through cold ashes. His weathered face betrayed nothing as he examined a single golden horsehair caught on a nearby branch. They were here, he confirmed, standing slowly. 2 days ago, maybe less. The 3 men with him exchanged glances. How can you be sure it's them? Asked Harlow, the youngest. Reynolds held up an ornate metal piece, a decorative saddle horn embossed with the Blackwater Racing Stable's insignia. Because Thunderbolt's custom racing saddle had this exact ornamentation. Someone's modified the saddle but kept pieces of it. Still don't understand why Blackwood wants that broken-down nag so badly, Harlow muttered. Reynolds' cold eyes fixed on the younger man. That broken-down nag is worth more than you'll earn in 10 lifetimes. Blackwater Racing paid $50,000 for him as a colt. Won nearly twice that in his first season. He tucked the saddle horn into his saddlebag. And his bloodline is priceless. If he's so valuable, why's he acting like he can barely walk? A thin, humorless smile crossed Reynolds's face. Because that horse is smarter than most men I know, including you. He mounted his stallion. The boys taught him to trust again. That's why they're moving north instead of hiding. Miles ahead, unaware of this exchange, Eli guided Thunderbolt along a narrow ridge. Following Machia's advice, they'd kept to heavily wooded areas, using streams to mask their trail when possible. The terrain had grown increasingly rugged as they approached the mountain pass that would lead them into Montana territory. "We're making good progress," Eli encouraged, consulting his map. According to his calculations, they might reach his uncle's ranch within 10 days if they maintained their pace. From their elevated position, Eli studied the vast landscape stretching before them. The breathtaking view revealed rolling plains beyond the mountains, shimmering like a golden sea in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in that expanse lay his uncle's ranch and safety. "See that?" Eli pointed. "That's where we're headed." Thunderbolt stood alert, ears forward as he surveyed the scene. Suddenly, his head jerked up, nostrils flaring. Before Eli could question the reaction, the horse backed several steps from the ridge. "What is it?" Eli asked, instantly wary. Scanning the terrain below, he finally spotted what had alarmed Thunderbolt. Riders, at least 4 of them, following the very trail they had used earlier that morning. Even at this distance, Eli recognized the lead rider's distinctive posture. "Reynolds," he whispered, heart sinking. They were closer than Machia had predicted. Much closer. Reynolds was reading the land with uncanny precision, cutting directly across terrain rather than following established trails. "He's tracking us better than I thought possible," Eli murmured. Quickly, they retreated from the ridge, seeking the cover of dense pine forest. Eli's mind raced as they pushed deeper into the woods. How had Reynolds closed the distance so quickly? What paths could they take that the skilled tracker wouldn't anticipate? As darkness approached, they found shelter in a small cave, partially hidden by a rockfall. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, a stroke of luck that might help obscure their trail. "We need a new plan," Eli told Thunderbolt, as they huddled in the cave's protection. The maps showed several possible routes through the mountains, but all eventually funneled through the same pass. If Reynolds anticipated this, he could simply wait at the pass and intercept them. "We'd need to move fast to get through before they set up there," Eli mused, stroking Thunderbolt's neck. "Really fast." The horse's intelligent eyes met his, understanding the implication. "I know you're hiding your speed to stay safe," Eli said quietly. "But maybe now, to stay safe, we need that speed." Thunderbolt nickered softly, pressing his muzzle against Eli's chest. "I won't force you," Eli promised. "It has to be your choice." Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by dreams of pursuit and capture. In one particularly vivid nightmare, Eli saw Reynolds separating him from Thunderbolt, the horse being dragged away, while Eli remained powerless to help. He woke with a start before dawn, breathing hard. Thunderbolt stood over him, having nudged him awake, eyes alert in the darkness. Outside, the faintest sound reached them, a distant horse's nickering, quickly silenced. Reynolds' men were closer than he'd feared. Perhaps searching the very woods where they sheltered. "They must have ridden through the night," Eli whispered, gathering their meager belongings with trembling hands. They slipped from the cave in grey pre-dawn light, moving as silently as possible through rain-soaked underbrush. Thunderbolt stepped with remarkable precision, avoiding loose rocks and fallen branches that might betray their position. At the forest's edge, Eli faced an impossible choice: cross the exposed mountainside in daylight, visible to anyone watching from below, or remain in the forest, where Reynolds' men were actively searching. "What would you do?" he asked Thunderbolt. The horse nudged him toward the saddle. Decision apparently made. As Eli mounted, he noticed Thunderbolt's transformed posture. head high, muscles tense beneath him, the very picture of the champion racer he truly was. For the first time since purchasing him at auction, Eli felt the coiled power of the animal, no longer concealed by his deliberate, plodding facade. "You've decided," Eli realized, leaning forward to whisper in the horse's ear. "Then let's show them what you can really do." With a gentle pressure of his knees, Eli gave Thunderbolt the signal. The horse gathered himself, and together they burst from the forest's edge into the open, no longer hiding, but flying toward the mountain pass with breathtaking speed. A golden blur against the awakening landscape. Behind them, a shout went up as they were spotted. The race for freedom had truly begun. The transformation was extraordinary. Thunderbolt ran like his namesake, a force of nature powerful and untamed. Eli had never experienced such speed on horseback, the landscape blurring around them as they raced across the mountainside. His initial fear gave way to exhilaration. This was Thunderbolt's true self, the champion hidden beneath the facade of a broken-down nag. The horse moved with perfect confidence, hooves barely seeming to touch the ground. Behind them, Reynolds and his men gave chase. But their mounts, though strong, lacked Thunderbolt's raw speed and agility. The distance between them gradually increased as the thoroughbred found his stride. By midday, they had crossed terrain that would normally have taken a full day's journey. When they finally paused to rest in a sheltered valley, Eli dismounted on shaky legs, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Words failed him as he stroked Thunderbolt's sweating neck. "You're incredible." The horse stood proud now, head high, no longer pretending weakness. Something fundamental had shifted, a decision made that couldn't be unmade. Thunderbolt had revealed himself, chosen to use his gift rather than hide it. They found shelter in an abandoned line shack, a small structure once used by cowboys watching distant sections of ranch land. Inside, a rustic table, chair, and narrow bed remained, thick with dust, but structurally sound. "We can rest here," Eli decided, unsaddling Thunderbolt and rubbing him down with handfuls of grass. "They won't catch up before nightfall." The shack's stone chimney had partially collapsed, leaving a hole in the roof. Eli explored cautiously, finding little of use until he discovered a loose floorboard beneath the bed. The hidden space contained several items wrapped in oilcloth, emergency supplies left by previous occupants. Most notable was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with neat handwriting. Eli settled on the dusty bed to read, finding himself immersed in the words of Peter Calloway, jockey to the famous Thunderbolt. May 12th, 1890. Today, I made a decision I can never take back. I helped Thunderbolt escape. After watching Mr. Blackwater order him whipped for failing to win by a large enough margin, I could stand it no more. This magnificent animal has given everything, won thousands, only to be treated with cruelty when he shows the slightest fatigue. Eli read on, learning how Calloway had planned the escape for weeks, saving money, preparing documents, arranging for Thunderbolt to disappear during a stormy night. The jockey had intended to take the horse north to Canada, but Blackwater's men had picked up their trail. May 20th. We are being pursued relentlessly. I fear I cannot protect Thunderbolt much longer. Today I made the difficult choice to separate. I've removed his racing saddle, dressed him as a common workhorse, and pointed him toward the Western Territories. Blackwater's men follow me eastward, believing I still have the horse. Perhaps this sacrifice will give Thunderbolt his chance at freedom. The final entry was tear-stained, barely legible. May 21st. They are close behind. This will likely be my final entry. If anyone finds this journal, know that Thunderbolt deserves his freedom. He bears the scars of his mistreatment, yet his spirit remains unbroken. I pray he finds someone who will treat him with the kindness and respect he deserves. Eli closed the journal, throat tight with emotion. "He saved you," he whispered to Thunderbolt, who watched him from the doorway. "And they killed him for it, didn't they?" The horse's solemn eyes seemed to hold the memory of that loss. "You've been running ever since," Eli realized. hiding your abilities, moving from place to place. Until the auction. He understood now why Thunderbolt had maintained his slow, plodding gait, not just to hide from pursuers, but because speed had been associated with pain and punishment. Performance had brought only whips and spurs from cruel masters. "We're the same, you and I," Eli said softly. "Both orphaned, both running towards something we hope exists." That night, Eli read portions of the journal aloud to Thunderbolt, who listened with pricked ears. The jockey's words painted a picture of the horse's early life, his training, his victories, and the growing cruelty of his owners as they pushed him beyond reasonable limits. "He loved you," Eli told the horse. "Enough to die for your freedom." In the morning, Eli made his decision. He placed the journal carefully in his saddlebag. "His sacrifice won't be wasted," he promised Thunderbolt. "I'll get you to Montana, to safety." As they prepared to depart, Eli noticed Thunderbolt watching him with new intensity. The pretense had fallen away between them. No more hiding, no more facade. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their shared orphaning creating a bond deeper than words. "I won't use spurs or whips," Eli promised, running his hand along Thunderbolt's powerful flank, where old scars remained visible beneath his coat. "Your speed is yours to give, not mine to take." Thunderbolt pressed his forehead against Eli's chest in a gesture of trust. Outside, the mountain pass beckoned, the gateway to Montana and potential safety. But Eli knew Reynolds would anticipate this route. The tracker was too skilled to be outmaneuvered by conventional means. "We need another way," Eli murmured, studying both maps again. Perhaps like the jockey before him, unexpected choices would be their best protection. The obvious path forward might be their greatest danger. The transformation was extraordinary. Thunderbolt ran like his namesake, a force of nature powerful and untamed. Eli had never experienced such speed on horseback, the landscape blurring around them as they raced across the mountainside. His initial fear gave way to exhilaration. This was Thunderbolt's true self, the champion hidden beneath the facade of a broken-down nag. The horse moved with perfect confidence, hooves barely seeming to touch the ground. Behind them, Reynolds and his men gave chase. But their mounts, though strong, lacked Thunderbolt's raw speed and agility. The distance between them gradually increased as the thoroughbred found his stride. By midday, they had crossed terrain that would normally have taken a full day's journey. When they finally paused to rest in a sheltered valley, Eli dismounted on shaky legs, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Words failed him as he stroked Thunderbolt's sweating neck. "You're incredible." The horse stood proud now, head high, no longer pretending weakness. Something fundamental had shifted, a decision made that couldn't be unmade. Thunderbolt had revealed himself, chosen to use his gift rather than hide it. They found shelter in an abandoned line shack, a small structure once used by cowboys watching distant sections of ranch land. Inside, a rustic table, chair, and narrow bed remained, thick with dust but structurally sound. "We can rest here," Eli decided, unsaddling Thunderbolt and rubbing him down with handfuls of grass. They won't catch up before nightfall. The shack's stone chimney had partially collapsed, leaving a hole in the roof. Eli explored cautiously, finding little of use until he discovered a loose floorboard beneath the bed. The hidden space contained several items wrapped in oilcloth, emergency supplies left by previous occupants. Most notable was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with neat handwriting. Eli settled on the dusty bed to read, finding himself immersed in the words of Peter Calloway, jockey to the famous Thunderbolt. May 12th, 1890. Today I made a decision I can never take back. I helped Thunderbolt escape. After watching Mr. Blackwater order him whipped for failing to win by a large enough margin, I could stand it no more. This magnificent animal has given everything, won thousands, only to be treated with cruelty when he shows the slightest fatigue. Eli read on, learning how Calloway had planned the escape for weeks, saving money, preparing documents, arranging for Thunderbolt to disappear during a stormy night. The jockey had intended to take the horse north to Canada, but Blackwater's men had picked up their trail. May 20th. We are being pursued relentlessly. I fear I cannot protect Thunderbolt much longer. Today I made the difficult choice to separate. I've removed his racing saddle, dressed him as a common workhorse, and pointed him toward the Western Territories. Blackwater's men follow me eastward, believing I still have the horse. Perhaps this sacrifice will give Thunderbolt his chance at freedom. The final entry was tear-stained, barely legible. May 21st. They are close behind. This will likely be my final entry. If anyone finds this journal, know that Thunderbolt deserves his freedom. He bears the scars of his mistreatment, yet his spirit remains unbroken. I pray he finds someone who will treat him with the kindness and respect he deserves. Eli closed the journal, throat tight with emotion. He saved you, he whispered to Thunderbolt, who watched him from the doorway. And they killed him for it, didn't they? The horse's solemn eyes seemed to hold the memory of that loss. You've been running ever since, Eli realized. Hiding your abilities, moving from place to place. Until the auction. He understood now why Thunderbolt had maintained his slow, plodding gait, not just to hide from pursuers, but because speed had been associated with pain and punishment. Performance had brought only whips and spurs from cruel masters. We're the same, you and I, Eli said softly, both orphaned, both running towards something we hope exists. That night, Eli read portions of the journal aloud to Thunderbolt, who listened with pricked ears. The jockey's words painted a picture of the horse's early life, his training, his victories, and the growing cruelty of his owners as they pushed him beyond reasonable limits. He loved you, Eli told the horse. Enough to die for your freedom. In the morning, Eli made his decision. He placed the journal carefully in his saddlebag. His sacrifice won't be wasted, he promised Thunderbolt. I'll get you to Montana, to safety. As they prepared to depart, Eli noticed Thunderbolt watching him with new intensity. The pretense had fallen away between them. No more hiding, no more facade. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Their shared orphaning, creating a bond deeper than words. I won't use spurs or whips, Eli promised, running his hand along Thunderbolt's powerful flank, where old scars remained visible beneath his coat. Your speed is yours to give, not mine to take. Thunderbolt pressed his forehead against Eli's chest in a gesture of trust. Outside, the mountain pass beckoned, their gateway to Montana and potential safety. But Eli knew Reynolds would anticipate this route. The tracker was too skilled to be outmaneuvered by conventional means. We need another way, Eli murmured, studying both maps again. Perhaps, like the jockey before him, unexpected choices would be their best protection. The obvious path forward might be their greatest danger. 3 days of hard riding brought them to a small trading post perched at the border of Montana Territory. The modest collection of buildings, a general store, livery stable, and saloon represented their first contact with civilization since escaping Reynolds at the ravine. Eli approached cautiously, leading Thunderbolt rather than riding him. They needed supplies desperately, but each interaction with others brought risk. Remember, you're just an ordinary horse, Eli whispered. Thunderbolt lowered his head obligingly, resuming his deceptive plodding gait. The trading post bustled with unexpected activity. Wagons loaded with supplies, cowboys milling about, a stagecoach preparing for departure. Eli kept his head down, ears open as he tied Thunderbolt to a hitching post near the water trough. "Stay here," he murmured. "I'll be quick." Inside the general store, conversations halted briefly as the door opened, then resumed when they saw it was just a boy. Eli selected the bare essentials, jerky, beans, coffee, using the meager coins he had left from Martha's generosity, while the shopkeeper wrapped his purchases. Eli overheard 2 men talking near the potbelly stove. Blackwood's expanding again, one said, spitting tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. "Bought out 3 smaller spreads last month alone. Man's appetite for land knows no bounds," replied the other, using every trick in the book too. Cutting fences, diverting water, threatening foreclosure. Heard he sent Reynolds north, the first continued. Something about recovering property. Reynolds? The second man whistled low. That's like sending a wolf after a rabbit. Man's got no conscience. Eli's hands trembled slightly as he paid for his goods. Blackwood's reach extended even here, hundreds of miles from Redemption Creek. Outside, a commotion near the stagecoach drew attention. A well-dressed gentleman was arguing with the driver. These documents are time-sensitive, the man insisted, waving papers. Legal filings that must reach Helena by week's end. Curiosity piqued. Eli edged closer, keeping Thunderbolt in sight. Sorry, Mr. Hammond, the driver replied. Got a full coach already. Next one's in 2 weeks. The man named Hammond ran a hand through silver hair in frustration. This is intolerable. These property transfers must be registered before month's end, or Blackwood will. Eli froze at the familiar name. Hammond turned, nearly colliding with him. Watch yourself, boy. Then, noticing Eli's ragged appearance, his expression softened. Apologies. I'm rather distressed. Eli found his voice. You mentioned Blackwood, sir? Silas Blackwood. Most ruthless land grabber in 3 territories. Hammond studied Eli with new interest. You've encountered him? Yes, sir. Back in Wyoming. Then you understand my urgency. Hammond indicated his papers. I represent several small ranchers fighting Blackwood's expansion. These documents prove water rights were illegally diverted. An idea formed in Eli's mind. I'm heading to Montana myself, sir. My uncle's ranch. Are you indeed? Hammond seemed skeptical. Traveling alone? Just me and my horse. Eli gestured toward Thunderbolt, who maintained his deceiving appearance of a worn-out nag. We're making good time. Doesn't look like he could make it another mile, Hammond observed. Appearances can be deceiving, sir. Something in Eli's tone made Hammond look at him more carefully. What's your name, boy? Eli Thatcher. My uncle is Jacob Thatcher. Hammond's eyebrows rose sharply. Jacob Thatcher, of Whispering Pines Ranch. You know him? Eli's heart leapt. Indeed I do. Hammond lowered his voice. He's one of my clients. Been fighting Blackwood's encroachment for years. Hope surged through Eli. Then he's alive. His ranch is still operating? Certainly, though not without challenges. Hammond studied Eli intently. Jacob never mentioned a nephew. My father was James Thatcher, Uncle Jacob's brother-in-law. Hammond's expression cleared. James. Yes, Jacob spoke of him. Passed recently, I heard. Last winter. Both my parents. Compassion crossed Hammond's face. I'm sorry, son. While they spoke, Hammond continued organizing his documents. Eli caught sight of one paper, a deed bearing both the Thatcher name and a familiar marking that made his breath catch. In the corner was the same lightning bolt crossed with a horseshoe that he'd seen branded on Thunderbolt. Sir, Eli ventured carefully, may I ask about that symbol? Hammond glanced at the document. It's the Whispering Pines brand. Your uncle's mark for his horses. He chuckled. Jacob breeds some of the finest thoroughbreds in Montana. Specializes in racing stock. The world seemed to tilt beneath Eli's feet as understanding crashed through him. Thunderbolt wasn't just any racehorse. He had been bred at his uncle's ranch before being sold to Blackwater Racing. Sir, Eli said urgently, I think I might be able to help you deliver those documents. Hammond looked skeptical. On that horse? Impossible. Trust me, Mr. Hammond, we can reach Helena faster than you'd believe possible. What's your interest in this, boy? Eli chose his words carefully. Let's just say Blackwood and I have unfinished business, and I think my horse might actually belong to my uncle. Hammond's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. That's quite a claim. One I can prove. Eli extended his hand. Give me the documents. I swear they'll reach Helena in time. After a moment's hesitation, Hammond extracted a sealed envelope. These must reach Judge Hollister personally. No one else, I understand. If you succeed, Hammond added, come to my office in Helena afterward. I may have information about your uncle that would interest you. As they spoke, Eli noticed a stranger watching them intently from the saloon doorway. Something about the man's focused attention raised alarm. Thank you, sir, Eli said, tucking the envelope securely inside his shirt. I should be going, Hammond nodded. Good luck, young Thatcher. You seem to have your uncle's determination. As Eli returned to Thunderbolt, he noticed the stranger had disappeared, only to reappear mounting a horse at the far end of the street. "Time to go," Eli murmured to Thunderbolt, quickly securing his supplies. "And I think we can stop pretending now." The horse's ears perked forward as if in agreement. They departed the trading post at a modest trot, maintaining the appearance of an ordinary boy and his horse until they were well beyond the settlement's boundaries. Behind them, barely visible in the distance, a lone rider followed. The lone rider maintained his distance throughout the afternoon, never approaching but never falling too far behind. Eli checked periodically, unease growing with each confirmation that they were being followed. "We need to lose him before dark," he told Thunderbolt, who seemed equally aware of their shadow. They veered off the main trail into dense woodland, using every technique Makia had taught them to obscure their path. For a time, it seemed to work. The rider was no longer visible when Eli checked their back trail. As dusk approached, they emerged from the forest near a small settlement even more modest than the trading post, just a cluster of buildings surrounding a crossroads. A weathered sign proclaimed Riverton, though no river was visible. "We'll rest here briefly," Eli decided. "Get some information about the quickest route to Helena." The town's single street was quiet as they approached. Too quiet, Eli realized with growing alarm. No one moved between buildings. No horses stood at hitching posts. No smoke rose from chimneys, despite the evening chill. Thunderbolt sensed it too, his ears swiveling nervously as they proceeded. When they reached the center of town, Eli understood why. 4 riders emerged from various buildings, effectively surrounding them. Their leader wore a silver badge that caught the last light of day. "That's far enough, boy," called the sheriff, hand resting on his holstered pistol. "We've been expecting you." Eli's throat went dry. "Sir, telegram came through this morning." "A boy and stolen horse heading north." The sheriff approached slowly. "Valuable property of Silas Blackwood." "There's been a mistake," Eli said, voice steadier than he felt. "This horse belongs to my uncle, Jacob Thatcher." The sheriff chuckled. "Nice try, son. We know all about the auction in Redemption Creek. Blackwood's offering a handsome reward." One of the deputies circled behind them. "Don't look like much of a horse to me, Sheriff." "Appearances deceive," replied the sheriff, echoing Reynolds' words so precisely that Eli felt a chill. "Blackwood says it's a champion racer in disguise." The lone rider who had followed them now appeared at the edge of town, completing their encirclement. He tipped his hat to the sheriff. "I told you they'd come this way, Wilson." "So you did, Collins." The sheriff turned back to Eli. "Now, boy, step down nice and easy. No one needs to get hurt." Eli's mind raced. "May I see this telegram?" Surprisingly, the sheriff nodded, extracting a paper from his vest pocket. "See for yourself." The telegram was brief. "Detained boy and yellow horse. Horse valuable stolen property. Reward $200. Hold until Reynolds arrives. Blackwood." "Sir," Eli said carefully, "I can prove this horse belongs to my uncle." He reached slowly into his shirt, producing Hammond's envelope. "These legal documents show the bloodlines and ownership." The sheriff took the envelope, examining the seal. "These are addressed to Judge Hollister in Helena." "Yes, sir. My uncle's lawyer asked me to deliver them." The sheriff studied Eli for a long moment, then unexpectedly chuckled. "Well, that puts us in a pickle, doesn't it? Blackwood wants you detained, but interfering with legal documents bound for a judge." He whistled low. "That's asking for trouble." Hope flickered in Eli's chest. "You could let us continue to Helena, sir. I'm sure the judge would appreciate your assistance and lose Blackwood's reward." The sheriff shook his head. "No, I think you'll spend the night in our jail while I consider options." One deputy approached to take Thunderbolt's reins. The horse backed away nervously. "Your animal seems skittish," observed the sheriff. "He doesn't like strangers," Eli explained, dismounting slowly. "Let me stable him myself." "Fine, but Collins goes with you." The town's small stable was empty of other horses. As Eli removed Thunderbolt's saddle, he whispered urgently, "Be ready. Tonight." Collins leaned against the stable door, watching. "That's really Thunderbolt? The famous racer?" Eli neither confirmed nor denied. "Blackwood hired me special to track you," Collins continued, pride evident in his voice. "Said I'm the best tracker in 3 territories. "Congratulations," Eli muttered. "Reynolds is a day behind, maybe less. Once he gets here—" Collins made a slicing motion across his throat. "Well, I wouldn't want to be you." The jail was a single cell attached to the sheriff's office. As the door clanged shut, Eli asked, "What about the legal documents?" The sheriff placed the envelope in his desk drawer. "Safe with me until morning." That night, Eli lay awake on the hard cot, listening to the sheriff's snores from the adjoining room. The single deputy on night duty sat at the desk, occasionally sipping from a flask. Shortly after midnight, commotion erupted outside, shouts, running footsteps, and a familiar sound that made Eli smile, despite his situation. Thunderbolt's distinctive whinny. The deputy rushed outside. Moments later, the sheriff stumbled from his bedroom, hastily buckling his gun belt. "What's happening?" he demanded. "Horse is loose," came the reply from outside. "Running wild through town." "Damnation!" The sheriff grabbed his hat. "That's $200 getting away." As the sheriff rushed outside, Eli moved quickly to the cell window. In the moonlight, he could see Thunderbolt charging down the street, deputies giving chase on foot. The horse would run just slowly enough to keep them pursuing, then dart away when they got close, creating a diversion. Minutes stretched like hours until finally the cell door opened. The stranger who'd been watching at the trading post, Collins, stood there with keys in hand. "You're helping me?" Eli asked incredulously. Collins grinned, removing his hat to reveal familiar features. "Didn't recognize your own cousin." "Cousin?" "Matthew Thatcher. Your uncle sent me looking for you weeks ago after getting your letter." He motioned urgently. "Come on. Your horse is leading them on a merry chase, but it won't last forever." As they slipped from the jail, Matthew grabbed Hammond's envelope from the sheriff's desk. "Can't forget these. Uncle Jacob needs them desperately." Outside, Matthew led him to horses waiting in an alley. "Thunderbolt will find us outside town. He's smarter than most men I know." "How did you know it was Thunderbolt?" Eli asked as they mounted. Matthew's expression grew serious in the moonlight. "Because Uncle Jacob's been searching for him since he was stolen 2 years ago. Blackwater Racing bought him legitimately, but when Jacob tried to buy him back, after seeing how they treated him, they refused." As they galloped from town, Eli felt pieces clicking into place. The mystery of Thunderbolt, the connection to his uncle, the determination of Blackwood to reclaim the horse. It was all part of a larger story than he had imagined, a story he was only beginning to understand. They rode hard through the night, Matthew leading them along little-used trails. True to prediction, Thunderbolt found them shortly after leaving Riverton, appearing like a ghost from the darkness to run alongside them. "Remarkable animal," Matthew said, admiration clear in his voice. "Uncle Jacob bred him from his best stock. Said he had something special from the moment he was born. Dawn brought storm clouds and plummeting temperatures, unusual for early autumn. As sleet began to fall, coating the ground with treacherous ice, Matthew pointed toward distant hills, Hunter's cabin about 3 miles ahead. "We can shelter there." The wooden cabin appeared weathered but solid, nestled against a rocky outcropping that provided natural protection from the wind. Inside, Matthew quickly started a fire in the stone hearth, while Eli tended to the horses in the adjoining lean-to. "Storm came early this year," Matthew commented as they warmed themselves. "Mountain weather's unpredictable, but this is strange even for these parts." Eli nodded, exhaustion catching up with him now that they had momentary safety. "How far to Uncle Jacob's ranch?" 2 days hard ride in good weather." Matthew glanced outside at the worsening conditions. "In this, could be longer." While exploring the cabin's provisions, Eli discovered a locked trunk beneath one of the bunks. Matthew produced a key from around his neck. "Uncle's emergency supplies," he explained, opening the trunk. Inside lay neatly organized tools, ammunition, preserved food, and a stack of yellowed correspondence. Eli's eye caught a familiar handwriting. "Are these from my father?" he asked, carefully lifting the topmost letter. Matthew nodded. Uncle Jacob keeps all his important correspondence. Says letters hold memories, paper can't fade. With trembling hands, Eli unfolded a letter dated 3 years earlier. Dear Jacob, it began in his father's neat script. Thank you for your generous offer to purchase our homestead. While the drought continues to challenge us, Emma and I remain committed to building our legacy here. Young Eli shows remarkable aptitude with horses. Perhaps he inherited your sister's gift. He gentled the new colt without any assistance, speaking to it in that quiet way that reminds me so much of Emma. Tears blurred Eli's vision as he continued reading. His father had written about their struggles, but remained optimistic, detailing plans for expanding their modest farm. The letter concluded with an invitation for Jacob to visit the following spring. He never came, did he? Eli asked, carefully refolding the letter. Matthew shook his head. There was trouble at the ranch. Blackwood had begun his campaign to acquire all the water rights in the territory. Another letter caught Eli's attention. This one addressed to his father, but marked returned. Undeliverable. It was dated just 2 months before his parents' deaths, dear James. Uncle Jacob had written, troubling news reaches us about Blackwood's expansion into Wyoming territories. His methods have grown increasingly aggressive here, cutting fences, diverting streams, intimidating smaller ranchers into selling. I fear he may target your homestead next, especially given its strategic location on Silver Creek. Consider my offer again. Bring Emma and Eli to Whispering Pines. The boy would thrive here, and our combined resources would better withstand Blackwood's encroachment. The letter continued, detailing concerns about Blackwood's illegal tactics and mentioning something called Operation Waterfall, apparently a legal challenge several ranchers were mounting against Blackwood's water rights. Claims. Uncle tried to warn them, Eli whispered. The letter came back unopened, Matthew confirmed grimly. By then, Blackwood had already bought the postmaster in Redemption Creek. Many letters never reached their destinations. Outside, the storm intensified, howling wind driving sleet against the cabin walls. Thunderbolt nickered nervously from the lean-to. Should check on him, Eli said, grateful for the distraction from painful revelations. He found Thunderbolt standing tensely, ears forward, eyes fixed on the lean-to's entrance. The horse's behavior immediately put Eli on alert. What is it, boy? Returning to the cabin, Eli found Matthew studying a map by firelight. Thunderbolt's acting strange, he reported. Like he senses something. Animals know things we don't, Matthew replied, rolling up the map. Storm's getting worse. If Reynolds is tracking us, this weather might slow him down, or drive him to the same shelter we found. Matthew's hand moved to the rifle propped by the door. Fair point. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped further. Eli checked on Thunderbolt again, finding the horse increasingly agitated. This time he noticed something concerning. The animal's breathing seemed labored, and he stood with weight shifted off his right foreleg, examining the leg carefully. Eli discovered heat and swelling around the fetlock, signs of strain or injury from their hard riding. His heart sank as he realized the implications. Without Thunderbolt at full strength, their chances of reaching the ranch ahead of Reynolds diminished significantly. Back in the cabin, he reported the situation to Matthew. How bad? His cousin asked. Not crippling, but he needs rest. A day at least. Matthew's expression grew grave. We don't have a day. Eli remembered Makia's medicine pouch. I have something that might help. By firelight, he sorted through the native healer's herbs, finding the packet marked for horse leg ailments. Following Makia's instructions, he created a poultice and applied it to Thunderbolt's leg, wrapping it with strips torn from his spare shirt. This has to work, he whispered, stroking the horse's neck. We've come too far to stop now. Throughout the night, the storm raged unabated. Eli slept fitfully, waking often to check on Thunderbolt. By dawn, the sleet had transformed into heavy snow that blanketed the landscape in treacherous white. Remarkably, Thunderbolt's leg showed improvement. The swelling reduced, though not entirely gone. The horse stood more evenly, testing the injured leg cautiously. "Makia's medicine works," Eli told Matthew, as they prepared a meager breakfast. "But he'll need more time to fully recover." Matthew stared grimly out the window at the mounting snowdrifts. "Time is the one thing we don't have. Reynolds knows these mountains as well as I do. Storm or not, he won't stop hunting." Checking their provisions, Eli made a difficult decision. "We need to split up." Matthew's objection was immediate and forceful. "Absolutely not. Uncle Jacob would have my hide if I left you alone in these mountains." "It's our best chance," Eli insisted, laying out his plan. "You take Hammond's documents to Helena. That's the priority. I'll continue with Thunderbolt to the ranch at a slower pace, giving his leg time to heal. Reynolds is after you specifically." "Exactly. He'll follow our trail, not yours." Eli met his cousin's concerned gaze steadily. "I know these mountains now. Thunderbolt and I can stay ahead of them, especially if they don't know we've split up." The argument continued through the morning. But as the storm briefly abated around midday, Matthew reluctantly conceded the logic of Eli's plan. "Take this," he said, pressing a small revolver into Eli's hand. "It was Uncle's. 6 shots. Make them count if needed." Eli tucked the weapon into his belt, hoping he wouldn't need to use it. Violence had never been in his nature. "The ranch is northwest from here," Matthew explained, marking Eli's map. "Follow this creek to Harper's Ridge, then west through Moonlight Valley. The main house sits at the base of 3 distinctive peaks. You can't miss them." They divided their supplies, with Matthew taking Hammond's precious documents. As they prepared the horses, Matthew handed Eli a sealed letter. "Uncle wrote this after your parents died. We searched for months but couldn't find you." Eli tucked it away for later reading. The knowledge that his uncle had looked for him, had wanted him, eased a pain he'd carried since becoming orphaned. 2 more days," Matthew said as they mounted. "Weather permitting. I'll reach Helena by tomorrow night. Then circle back with help." "We'll be fine," Eli assured him with more confidence than he felt. They parted at a fork in the trail, Matthew heading east toward Helena, while Eli and Thunderbolt continued northwest at a deliberately slow pace to protect the horse's healing leg. The storm returned by late afternoon, snow falling in thick curtains that reduced visibility to mere yards. Eli relied on his compass and Thunderbolt's instincts to maintain their course through increasingly difficult terrain. As dusk approached, they sought shelter beneath a rocky overhang. The temperature continued to drop, and Eli found himself shivering despite the fire he managed to build. "Just a few more days," he told Thunderbolt, sharing his meager rations with the horse. "Then we'll both be home." Home. The word felt strange after months of homelessness. Would Uncle Jacob's ranch truly become his home? Would he belong there? Questions without answers swirled like the snowflakes around their makeshift camp. Morning brought temporary clearing and an unwelcome discovery. While scouting their route, Eli spotted fresh tracks in the snow, multiple horses moving parallel to their own path. Reynolds had found their trail despite the storm. Worse, the tracks indicated the men were now ahead of them, positioning themselves to intercept rather than chase. "They know where we're headed," Eli realized aloud. "They're cutting us off from the ranch." Studying his map, Eli identified an alternative route, longer and more difficult, but potentially allowing them to circle around Reynolds' men. It would require crossing a high ridge, exposed to the elements, risky in the unstable weather. "What do you think?" he asked Thunderbolt, who sniffed the air nervously. The horse's answer came in the form of a deliberate step toward the ridge trail. Decision made. The ascent proved brutally challenging. Wind-driven snow stung Eli's face as they climbed, the path narrowing dangerously along exposed sections. Thunderbolt moved carefully, testing each step before committing his weight, protecting his healing leg. Near the summit, Eli paused to check their bearings. The momentary clearing offered a spectacular view. Snow-covered mountains stretching to the horizon, and in the distance, a valley where he could just make out buildings that must be his uncle's ranch, so close. The crack of a rifle shattered the moment. Snow exploded near Eli's feet as a bullet struck the ground. Instinctively, he dropped flat, pulling Thunderbolt down beside him behind a rocky outcropping. More shots followed, pinging off rocks overhead. Reynolds had anticipated their detour. "We're pinned down," Eli whispered to Thunderbolt, mind racing for options. From his protected position, he spotted the shooters. 2 men on a parallel ridge, perfectly positioned to command the trail ahead. Behind them, he glimpsed more riders approaching, including a figure he recognized with dread: Reynolds. As if confirming Eli's identification, something small and shiny arced through the air, landing in the snow near their hiding place. A silver dollar, Reynolds' calling card and clear message: "Surrender or die." Eli's hand moved to the revolver at his belt. 6 shots against how many men? "Impossible odds," Thunderbolt nudged him urgently, eyes focused on a nearly invisible game trail that branched from their position, a steep descent toward the valley that would expose them completely during the initial downward climb. "That's suicide," Eli whispered. "They'd pick us off before we made it halfway down." Another bullet struck closer, showering them with rock fragments. Their position wouldn't protect them much longer. Eli unfolded his map one last time, noting the distance to his uncle's ranch. Even at Thunderbolt's full gallop, they were still hours away. Help from Matthew couldn't arrive before tomorrow at the earliest. The silver dollar gleamed accusingly in the snow. Blackwood's men didn't want Eli. They wanted Thunderbolt. The horse represented both valuable property and a threat to Blackwood's plans. "If I surrender," Eli whispered, stroking Thunderbolt's neck, "promise me you'll run. Get to the ranch." The horse's response was immediate and emphatic, teeth gently but firmly gripping Eli's coat, pulling him toward the hidden trail. All or nothing, together. Decision crystallized in Eli's mind. If they were going to die, it wouldn't be cowering behind rocks or in surrender. "All right," he whispered, mounting carefully. "One last ride together." Gathering the reins, Eli took a deep breath and made his choice. "Let's go home, Thunderbolt." They burst from behind the rocks like a golden bullet. Thunderbolt no longer disguised his abilities, launching into a full racing gallop down the treacherous game trail. Shots rang out behind them, bullets whining past as Reynolds' men adjusted their aim at the suddenly moving target. Eli lay flat against Thunderbolt's neck, making himself as small as possible. The horse moved with impossible precision, zigzagging down the steep trail while maintaining breakneck speed. Each stride demonstrated years of professional training combined with natural talent. This was the legendary Thunderbolt that racing crowds had cheered. "That's it!" Eli encouraged breathlessly. "Show them what you can do." A bullet clipped a branch inches from Eli's head. He didn't dare look back, focusing entirely on maintaining his balance through Thunderbolt's evasive maneuvers. Reaching the valley floor, they exploded into open terrain. Here Thunderbolt truly opened up, stretching into the full extension of a champion racehorse at maximum effort. The sensation was unlike anything Eli had ever experienced. Raw power and speed that seemed to defy physics. Through snow-dusted forest they flew, Thunderbolt instinctively choosing paths that offered momentary cover between clearings. Behind them, hoofbeats announced the pursuit, Reynolds and his men giving chase at full gallop. Eli risked a glance back. 4 riders followed, with Reynolds in the lead astride a powerful black stallion. The gap was significant, but not insurmountable for fresh horses. And Thunderbolt, despite his heart and speed, had been traveling for days with an injured leg. Already Eli could feel the subtle change in the horse's stride, favoring the right foreleg ever so slightly. Pushing this pace for long would risk catastrophic injury. "Pace yourself," he whispered, patting Thunderbolt's neck. "We've got miles to go." The horse seemed to understand, adjusting to a more sustainable gallop that still ate up ground with remarkable efficiency. The immediate danger of bullets had passed. They were out of effective rifle range. But the pursuit continued relentlessly. Memories of his father's pistol lessons surfaced as Eli's hand touched the revolver at his belt. James Thatcher had been a reluctant but practical teacher. "A gun is a last resort, son. But if that last resort comes, you'd better be ready. Terrain opened before them, a vast snow-covered meadow stretching toward distant mountains. No cover but the smoothest, fastest route toward the ranch. Thunderbolt didn't hesitate, charging into the open expanse. For 20 glorious minutes, they maintained their lead, flying across the meadow like creatures from legend. Then Eli felt the change, a slight hitch in Thunderbolt's stride, the injured leg beginning to fail under prolonged stress. Just a little further, Eli encouraged, knowing the horse would run himself to death rather than surrender. The sound of rushing water reached them, a river cutting across their path. Swollen with snowmelt, it churned angrily between steep banks. Eli's heart sank as they approached. Too wide to jump, too fast to ford safely. Thunderbolt slowed at the riverbank, breathing heavily, sides heaving with exertion. Behind them, Reynolds' riders appeared at the meadow's edge, spotting their quarry trapped at the water's edge. "We need to find a crossing," Eli said urgently. Scanning the riverbank in both directions, Thunderbolt made his own decision, plunging directly into the frigid current. "Thunderbolt, no!" Eli cried, but it was too late. The horse swam powerfully despite his exhaustion, angling across the current rather than fighting directly against it. Ice-cold water reached Eli's waist as he clung to Thunderbolt's mane, the current threatening to sweep them both downstream. For a terrifying moment, Thunderbolt disappeared completely beneath the surface, submerged by the powerful flow. Then he resurged, finding footing on an unseen sandbar, lunging forward with renewed determination. Somehow, impossibly, they reached the far bank. Thunderbolt clambered up the slippery slope, legs trembling with fatigue, but still moving forward. Eli looked back through snow-dampened hair. Reynolds had reached the opposite bank but halted his men. Even the ruthless tracker wouldn't risk the dangerous crossing with tired horses. "Smart," Reynolds called across the water. "But there's a bridge 2 miles downstream." "This isn't over, boy." Eli didn't waste breath responding. Every minute gained was precious. Thunderbolt staggered forward, wet coat beginning to freeze in the biting wind. "We need shelter," Eli murmured, scanning the terrain ahead. They found it in an abandoned barn, half collapsed from age and weather. Inside, Eli worked frantically to dry Thunderbolt with handfuls of old straw, knowing a wet horse in freezing temperatures faced deadly peril. The horse's injured leg had worsened significantly. Swelling stretched from fetlock to knee, and Thunderbolt could barely put weight on it. "I'm sorry," Eli whispered, applying the last of Makya's medicine. "I asked too much of you." Sheltered from the wind, but not the cold, Eli huddled against Thunderbolt for warmth. The revolver lay ready beside him. 5 shots, he'd counted. Reynolds had 4 men. If they found them before help arrived... His thoughts were interrupted by Thunderbolt's sudden alertness. Ears forward, nostrils flared. Seconds later, Eli heard it too, approaching hoofbeats, multiple riders. "Too soon," he whispered, reaching for the gun with trembling fingers. Reynolds couldn't have crossed and circled back this quickly. The barn door creaked open. Eli raised the revolver, finger tensing on the trigger. "Eli Thatcher," called an unfamiliar voice. "Matthew sent us." 3 figures entered, ranch hands from the look of their gear, wearing the distinctive lightning bolt brand on their coat sleeves. "Uncle Jacob's men, Thunderbolt's hurt," were the only words Eli managed before exhaustion claimed him. When he regained consciousness, he was wrapped in warm blankets on a sled, being pulled by a sturdy draft horse. Beside him, Thunderbolt traveled on a larger sled, carefully secured and covered with blankets. "Almost there, kid," one of the ranch hands assured him. Another hour to whispering pines. Through half-closed eyes, Eli watched the landscape pass. In the distance, 3 distinctive peaks rose against the sky, the landmark Matthew had described. The mountains that marked home. Behind them, shouts and gunfire suddenly erupted. Reynolds had found them. "Keep going," ordered the lead rancher. "Get the boy and Thunderbolt to the ranch. I'll hold them off." Before Eli could protest, the man had wheeled his horse around, rifle ready. The remaining hands whipped the draft horses into a gallop, sleds bouncing wildly over the snow-covered ground. More shots echoed across the valley. Eli struggled to sit up, watching in horror as the rancher who'd stayed behind tumbled from his saddle. "We can't leave him," Eli cried. But Reynolds and his remaining men had broken past the fallen rancher, closing the distance with each passing minute. "We won't make it," said the second hand, looking back anxiously. Eli made his decision. Grabbing his uncle's revolver, he rolled from the sled onto the snow. "Go!" he shouted to the surprised ranch hands. "Get Thunderbolt to safety!" "Kid, no! Go!" Eli repeated, taking position behind a fallen log. "I'll slow them down." As the sleds continued toward the ranch, Eli steadied his breathing the way his father had taught him. 5 bullets. 4 enemies. No room for error. Reynolds appeared first, his black stallion breathing steam in the cold air. Eli aimed carefully, squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley as Reynolds' hat flew from his head. The tracker instantly dove from his saddle for cover. 4 bullets left. The standoff stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Reynolds and his men had taken cover behind trees and rocks, wary after Eli's warning shot. The ranch building stood tantalizingly close, perhaps half a mile across open ground. "Give it up, boy," Reynolds called. "You're only delaying the inevitable." Eli remained silent, conserving his limited ammunition. His father's lessons echoed in his mind. Make every shot count. Make them wonder how many bullets you have left. Movement to his right caught Eli's attention, one of Reynolds' men attempting to circle around his position. Eli fired, the bullet splintering bark near the man's head, sending him diving back to cover. 3 bullets left. A peculiar calm settled over Eli despite the danger. He'd made his choice. Thunderbolt would reach safety even if he didn't. In the distance, he spotted activity at the ranch. Riders were emerging, at least 6 of them, moving quickly toward his position. Help was coming, but Reynolds' men were much closer. "Last chance, boy," Reynolds shouted. "Throw out your gun and tell us where the horse is." "He's home," Eli called back defiantly. "Where you'll never touch him again." His words triggered fury in Reynolds. The tracker broke cover, firing rapidly as he advanced. Eli ducked lower, bullets thudding into the log, protecting him. When Reynolds paused to reload, Eli rose quickly, aimed, and fired. His shot went wide, but forced Reynolds back into cover. 2 bullets left. The remaining men began advancing from multiple directions, making it impossible for Eli to cover all approaches. A shot grazed his arm, tearing his sleeve and drawing blood. Pain flared hot and immediate. One man had worked his way to within 30 yards, too close. Eli aimed carefully and fired. The man dropped, clutching his leg with a howl of pain. 1 bullet left. Reynolds seized the opportunity while Eli was distracted. The tracker lunged from cover, covering the distance between them with surprising speed. Before Eli could bring his revolver around, Reynolds was upon him, knocking the weapon from his hand. "Brave but foolish," Reynolds snarled, pinning Eli to the ground. "Now where's the horse?" "Safe from you," Eli gasped, struggling against the man's weight. Reynolds pressed a knife to Eli's throat. "Blackwood wants that horse, and I never fail to deliver." "This time you will," the new voice came from behind them. Reynolds froze, then slowly raised his hands as the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked reached their ears. "Stand up." "Slowly," commanded the voice. Reynolds complied, keeping his hands visible. Eli scrambled away, turning to see his rescuer, a tall, weathered man in his 50s, with familiar eyes that matched his mother's, Uncle Jacob. Behind him, ranch hands had Reynolds' remaining men covered and disarmed. "Jacob Thatcher," Reynolds said flatly. "Should have known you'd show up. On my land. Threatening my nephew?" Jacob's rifle remained steadily aimed at Reynolds' chest. "You're a long way from Blackwood's protection, Reynolds. Mr. Blackwood has legal claim to that horse," Reynolds insisted. "Stolen property?" "Stolen twice," Jacob interrupted. "First from my ranch 2 years ago, then legally purchased by my nephew at auction." His voice hardened. "The territorial magistrate might be interested in how that thoroughbred disappeared from my stables, only to appear in Blackwater Racing's lineup a month later." Something shifted in Reynolds' expression, calculation replacing confidence. Your complaint is with Blackwood, the tracker said carefully. I'm just doing my job. Your job ended the moment you crossed onto Thatcher land. Jacob nodded to his men. Take their weapons and escort them to the property line. If they return, they'll be shot as trespassers. As Reynolds and his men were led away, Jacob turned to Eli, rifle lowering at last. For a moment, the older man simply studied him, emotions playing across his weathered face. You look like your mother, he said finally, voice gruff with feeling. Words failed Eli as years of loneliness crashed through him. This man, his mother's brother, was the family he'd journeyed so far to find. Thunderbolt, Eli began, is safe in our best stall, Jacob assured him. Our veterinarian is with him now. The ride to the ranch passed in a blur of exhaustion and relief. Whispering Pines revealed itself as an impressive operation. Well-built structures, extensive corrals, dozens of horses of exceptional quality grazing in protected pastures. The main house stood welcoming with smoke curling from multiple chimneys. As they approached, a figure emerged from the front porch. Matthew returned from Helena. Told you he was something special, Matthew called to his father as they dismounted. Jacob nodded. Held off Reynolds and his men alone. Got Thunderbolt home safe. The word home echoed in Eli's mind as Jacob led him inside. The house was everything his parents' modest homestead had not been. Spacious, well-furnished, warm throughout. Yet touches reminded him of his mother. Similar quilts, arrangements of dried flowers, framed sketches of horses. Your room's ready, Jacob said, showing him upstairs. Has been since we got your letter. The bedroom was large and comfortable, with windows overlooking the ranch and mountains beyond. On the bedside table sat a framed photograph of Eli's parents on their wedding day. His mother radiant, his father standing proud. How's Thunderbolt? Eli asked, fighting overwhelming emotion. Resting comfortably, Jacob replied. Legs badly strained, but should heal completely with time. His expression softened with pride. The ranch hands say you refuse safety to protect him. He would have done the same for me, Eli said simply. He did, many times. That evening, after a hot bath and meal that seemed impossibly luxurious after months of near starvation, Eli sat with his uncle beside a crackling fire. Reynolds won't be the end of it, Jacob warned. Blackwood doesn't give up easily. The legal documents Matthew delivered will help, Jacob nodded. Hammond believes the water rights case could break Blackwood's hold on the territory. But it will be a fight? I'm not afraid of fighting, Eli said quietly. Not anymore? Jacob studied him with new respect. No, I don't suppose you are. Early the next morning, Eli slipped out to visit Thunderbolt. The horse occupied the largest stall in the main barn, his injured leg professionally wrapped, fresh hay and water abundant. Upon seeing Eli, Thunderbolt nickered softly in greeting. We made it, Eli whispered, stroking the horse's nose. We're home. Outside, the rising sun painted the three peaks golden. Below, the ranch was coming alive. Ranch hands moving between buildings. Smoke rising from cookhouse chimneys, horses being led to pastures. Eli stood in the stable doorway, Thunderbolt at his shoulder, watching his new home awaken. The Orphan and the horse that nobody wanted had found where they belonged, together.